I've been working on this Human Torch video for about 2 weeks now, and I'm seriously convinced that people generally don't understand how to play him to his fullest potential. I keep getting like game chat comments where people are like, I've never seen a Human Torch MVP before. Or they say, I didn't expect you to get any kills, to be honest, when I saw you lock in Human Torch. But guys, Johnny Storm is the real deal. You'll be bullying people, even Spideys, who aren't used to people fighting back. They'll be running for health packs, and you'll be like, nah, man, I did not say you could do that. You'll be like, hey, man, I'd love to introduce your face to this wall. Or they'll be like, hey, I think I'll walk out this door. And you'll be like, you know, I don't remember giving you permission to do that. Jokes aside, there's a lot I want to cover in this video, but I gotta lay down a couple of disclaimers up front. As with all my guides, we will not be reading off ability descriptions in this video. You can read. I will also not be showing practice range footage either, as I find application to be much more valuable than spending all our time on theory and showing off abilities against immobile robots. And lastly, I didn't sit down to write this script until after I had spent over 20 hours of gameplay on Johnny Storm, as I think honestly you cannot possibly give a guide worth its weight until you've actually taken the character through the trenches. There's just too much nuance to this game to really have valid, advanced thoughts until you've actually put the time in. Okay, so now that I got that out of the way, let's start talking about how to apply the Human Torch's kit in Marvel Rivals. As always, I like to start the meat of the video with a quick summation of the character's core gameplay loop. Johnny is a meteor. His presence is felt at range, but it's his arrival that really brings destruction. So you're basically going to be causing panic from afar and then making a devastating arrival to get key picks. And then you're back to range and you start the loop all over again. A word that's commonly used in this community to describe certain characters is disruption. You know, they use that word to describe a lot of characters. I think it's a word that works really well to describe, tons of heroes like maybe Thor, for example. But for Johnny Storm, I think a better word is actually inundation. If you don't know what that means, just think like overwhelm or overpower. So Johnny is all about causing mass hysteria. He applies a ton of pressure by giving the enemy too many variables to worry about and then striking in the middle of that confusion. You'll see a ton of gameplay in this video where I'm laying down like a lot of fire from afar. It makes the healers freak out because while no one is at critical health, they still have like 4 or 5 teammates in the yellow and they feel like that pressure. They're like, oh crap, I gotta start healing people. It's in that moment of bewilderment that you come crashing down like a guillotine to absolutely decimate someone, whether it's the healer or a key duelist. So that's the basic loop. I think where people are playing him wrong is that they're one of two things. They're either focusing too much on damaging people from range, or they're relying far too much on his primary fire. When in reality, it's his secondary fire, his right click, that should be your main focus. So let's start breaking down his abilities and focus on how to really apply them properly. Now, truth be told, it's hard to really take these one by one because the truth is that Johnny Storm is all about the synergy between all of his abilities working cohesively as a unit. They're like a conversation, like a full sentence is, proper noun, verb, direct object, punctuation. That's Johnny Storm's kit. Like it's writing a full sentence using all of his abilities in one cohesive structure. But let's focus on that flaming meteor ability first, right? This is your dive, your F on mouse and keyboard. There are so many applications to this, guys. It's not a basic ability. It's heckin' versatile. You can delete Jeff out of his ult. I have like 7 different clips in this video of me doing exactly that. You can knock enemies off the map. You can separate a healer from the pack. You can knock an enemy into your teammates. You can knock an enemy away from your teammates. And yes, you can even kill Luna Snow out of her ult. I am not freaking kidding. When you dive, you're going to do 40 damage in a 5-meter radius. And you're going to knock enemies back away from the point that you landed at. So you can land behind them, knock them forward. You can land in front of them and knock them backwards. You can land beside them and knock them away from a health pack that they're running to. I do this all the time. I do it to Spider-Mans the most, but anybody running for a health pack is a prime target for a dive. But here's the kicker. For every blazing blast fireball in the area, you're going to detonate those fireballs when you arrive with this dive. and you're going to do 55 damage per fireball. So you should always throw a blazing blast and then dive. But you can do 2 blazing blasts, you can do 3 blazing blasts. If you do 3 and then dive, you can kill a Luna in her ult. If you see a Jeff ulting your team, put 2 or 3 down in the middle of the circle where he's gobbling them up and dive as soon as he resurfaces. Although my wife is a Jeff main, and she asked me not to share that bit of info in this video, so don't tell her that I did. Or if you're a Human Torch player and you're playing against a Jeff named girl on a hippo, just don't do it to her, and we're all good. Next, we gotta talk about his primary fire. Okay, this is getting buffed like right freaking now. All the gameplay in this video is pre-buff, okay? So just know that if you're watching this video, the primary fire is even stronger than it is in this gameplay. So it has 2 more projectiles now, and it travels faster. This ability is a cluster of projectiles. They start really tightly packed together, and they break apart and spread out the further that they travel. So obviously, if you're barrel stuffing somebody, just go for those headshots. It's going to be really tightly packed together. Otherwise, they're going to fan out quite a bit and you're not going to get full damage. It does max damage within 15 meters and it drops off dramatically after that. But here's the thing. Everyone was whining that it was weak, that it did bad damage, that it was hard to land attacks on people. I don't think it needed a buff, to be honest, personally, but I'll take it anyways. You're supposed to use it up close, and especially against like tanks for big damage. But everyone's just spamming it from forever away and crying that it doesn't do great damage. You gotta use it to prime targets, but it's mainly used to do massive, and I do mean massive damage up close. Think of it like a shotgun. Use it after a dive. I mean, look at this. 1 fireball, 1 dive, 1 primary fire. That's all it takes. Fireball, dive, primary, and this Punisher has to judge, jury, and executioner his way all the way back to the spawn room. It does 7 damage per projectile, and now it fires 14 projectiles for a total damage of 98 to the body and 196 to the head. That is a ton of damage. So here's my tip. Don't just spam it up close. It's way more worthwhile to take your time to line up the shot that you know is going to hit and then pull the trigger. If you just spam, you're going to miss a lot. And you got to lead your shot a little bit because it has travel time. And ideally, you want to have an accuracy rating of 20% or more on the Human Torch. When I first started playing him, I was getting like 10% or whatever. And I was like, what's going on here? You got to have trigger discipline. That's how you know you're using him right. I see all these complaints of people who are like, they've got 7% accuracy, and that just tells me you don't know how to use this kit. And then that takes me to his Blazing Blast ability. This is going to help up your accuracy. There's a lot to go over, so stay with me here. Blazing Blast should be, if you're up in the air, think of this as your primary fire. It's got a rapid cooldown, okay? With Blazing Blast, you can shoot fireballs that leave a pool of fire on the ground for 6 seconds. These pools of fire will only last on surfaces that cannot be destroyed and not constructs. So that means you cannot put them on roofs that can be destroyed. You cannot put them on bridges that can be destroyed. You cannot put them on the Punisher turrets. You cannot put them on the payload. You can put them around those things, but not on them. They have no damage drop off. Okay, remember that. That's huge. They have no damage drop off at range, and they do 40 damage on impact in a spherical radius of 3 meters. And they do damage over time for 6 seconds, ticking twice a second for 25 damage per second. Okay, wrap your head around that. That's why I say this is your primary fire from range, because 40 damage on impact, 25 damage per second when they hit. Now think about your primary fire. It's going to be experiencing some extreme damage drop-off at range. Only use your primary fire at range if people are tightly clustered together, or if people are flying and you can't really land your Blazing Blast. Also, let me recommend that when you're close up in a close-up duel with a squirrely character that's really hard to hit, okay, you might actually just want to spam Blazing Blast instead of your primary fire for more consistent guaranteed damage in a radius instead of running the risk of missing your shot up close. But here's another mechanic. You can connect any pools of fire from your Blazing Blast so long as they're within 40 meters of each other. You can create walls, you can create enclosures or prisons. Now if you make a wall, the enemy will take 65 damage when they cross it. If you make a prison, like an enclosed loop, right, they will take 50 damage per second if they are inside of that enclosure. That's huge! So ideally, you want to be placing prisons every time your cooldown is available. I mean, every second it's available, drop a prison somewhere. Put it in doorways, put it in choke points, put it in hallways. But most importantly, draw your 4 corners and connect the dots on a capture point or a payload. This will net you a ton of damage. It will also charge your ultimate extremely quickly. You can place it outside the entrance on defense in convoy, so that at the very beginning of the match, you can get out there with like 25% of your ult cooldown in the opening seconds of the match, while everyone else is at 2%, and you're already a quarter of a way to your first ultimate. Now remember the opening of this video when I said Johnny is all about creating panic and then diving? This is it. This is how you create that panic. You're going to deal a ton of damage in a wide area to multiple enemies, and then, while they're trying to deal with that damage and come up with a plan for rectifying that damage, that is when you dive on a key enemy. Could be a healer, could be a duelist. But here's something to remember. If the lines don't connect completely, then you won't have a prison. You'll just have walls. So the lines, they cannot go through a wall, they cannot go through a payload, they cannot go through a car on the map or some other object. They'll still connect through that object, don't get me wrong, and you'll create that wall, but it won't count as being an enclosure, so you won't do any prison damage. So make sure that there are no obstructions, if possible, to maximize your damage output. Also, you can connect up to 5 of these. You need at least 2, but up to 5. I recommend for consistency, usually just doing 4 points. Draw 4 corners and connect them. 3 is too small, you won't get as much coverage, do it in a pinch, but otherwise you really want to shoot for 4. 5 is great when possible, you create like a pentagon, but you'll be vulnerable while you're placing those. It's a lot of time for you to be up in the air trying to draw all the corners and connection points for this shape. So 4 is your bread and butter. Not only will you do great damage, but you'll also get a ton of ultimate energy in the process. Next up, let's talk about that ultimate now that we're mentioning it. You're going to be able to throw tornadoes instead of your blazing blast while you're in your ultimate, and you're going to do it with no cooldown in between them. You'll be able to use your plasma body movement ability with no energy consumed for it, so you can just hold shift or whatever your sprint button is on a controller, and that you'll just constantly be moving really quickly. You can have up to 4 tornadoes on the field at a time, but they do despawn fairly rapidly, so spam the heck out of them. They do 120 damage per second. That's after the buff. They used to do 100. You can also do your Meteor dive on those tornadoes as well. This dive, by the way, sometimes you should use it to get to safety instead of using it as an offensive tool. Maybe throw down your tornadoes, but if you die, those tornadoes despawn. So maybe you're throwing down those tornadoes and you get really hurt. You're at critical damage. Just spin around, pull a 180, and dive back towards your healers. Use your dive as a way of evading and keeping those tornadoes on the field for longer. Remember, that dive does come back pretty quickly, so it's okay to use your charge to save your own life from time to time. Also worth noting, when you activate your ult, you're also going to do big explosion damage in a spherical area around you, dealing 80 damage to anyone nearby. So you can definitely activate this when near enemies as well. I tend to try to use this ultimate when I'm safely up in the air and away from enemies, but it does come in handy every now and then to pop it in the middle of the crowd too. Okay, there's just a few more things I want to talk about real quick before we close this video out. First up, Johnny Storm flies silently. Okay, that's really important to know. He doesn't make noise like Iron Man. He doesn't have heavy footsteps while walking like other characters do. He flies with no noise at all, meaning it's really easy to sneak up on enemies as well. He tends to not really play like a stealth character, but stealth is also definitely an option if you need to flank someone like a sniper, a Hela, or creep up on a Spider-Man who's trying to flank your team. Next little note, his KO notification when you get him at least up to Centurion is straight fire, by the way. Pun totally intended. It looks amazing. But one quick downside to Johnny Storm, you're going to need to ask for heals a lot because healers, I love them to death, don't get me wrong, but they seldom look up, okay? So you have to come back down to earth and stand in front of them from time to time. You tend to be out of their peripheral vision, so the burden is on you to come back down and get healing, unfortunately. Otherwise, you'll just be chilling up there with lower health forever. Now, also, we got to mention his counters. What enemies really have an advantage over you? Well, number one is Hela. Hela is the ultimate counter to flying enemies. She does huge damage. Frankly, the accuracy of her primary fire is extremely forgiving. I say that as someone who occasionally plays her. I'm always like, yo, how did that hit? I was way off. So yeah, Hela is a hard counter. I tend to really focus her and single her out I just go for that one blazing blast and then dive her and then clean her up with the primary fire. But if you're just chilling in the air, she's going to chew you to pieces. Scarlet Witch, also a pretty good counter to you. Again, I'm going to play a little bit more conservatively until I send her to the respawn screen, then I go full gas. And truth be told, a really experienced Spider-Man can be a pain in the butt. Again, I tend to play close to my supports and focus him when he dives. That's when I go full gas. But one of the most annoying characters to play against, hands down, is easily Star-Lord. He does his dumb little baby dodge that gives him shielding, and his guns sound more feminine than a Mazda Miata hitting third gear. So those are the characters you gotta watch out for. At the end of the day, the Human Torch is so much better than people are giving him credit for, and if you're playing him correctly, it will certainly be reflected in the damage numbers at the end of the match, like for example this one, where I've got, 21,000 damage, and everyone else in the game is down like between 9 and 14,000 at best. You'll be the most dominant force on the battlefield, so take that time to learn his cadence, become a problem for the enemy, make them so frustrated that they actually switch characters mid-game. That's how you know you're doing your job right. You'll see expletives in the game chat, people will complain about you and call you a no-skill flyer character. That's a badge of honor for Johnny Storm. So go be the hot shot I know you can be and start dominating lobbies today. Johnny rapidly became my #1 favorite duelist to play by a landslide while I was making this video, and I think if you play him right, you'll love him too. Good luck out there, friends. If you enjoyed this video, just know that I have a ton of guides on my channel, and they're all the same. I always make sure to play a character for like 20 hours minimum before I start even thinking about making a guide. I've got a ton of characters to lord at this point because I full send. It's just what I do. So consider subscribing if that's the kind of content you can get behind, and definitely feel free to leave a like on the video if you found it helpful. And with that I say, be warm and well fed, my friends, and I hope to catch you in the arena. Bye-bye.